My name is Laura Baum. I'm the Associate Director of the Wesleyan Media Project. I've been here at Wesleyan for almost 10 years, and I kind of manage the day-to-day operations of the project. So the Wesleyan Media Project was started in 2010 to track election advertising in federal elections. And it was started by Erica Franklin Fowler here at Wesleyan, and Michael Franz at Bowdoin College, and Travis Ridout at Washington State University. And really our goal at the Wesleyan Media Project is to track advertising in federal elections in order to provide better transparency in government. You know, we provide public information on who is trying to influence federal elections. When we started, we were very focused on television advertising, but since we've really expanded, so we're also looking at, advertising online. Really, we focus a lot on Facebook and Google as far as digital advertising is concerned, but we're trying to be able to make comparisons now across platform. So look at what's happening on TV. Is that different from the way people are advertising online? The goal of the Wesleyan Media Project is to develop a long-term definitive database of advertising in federal elections. And in order to do that, unfortunately in this country there isn't a publicly accessible resource for this advertising, and so we actually have to purchase data from a data provider called Kantar CMAG. And what we get from them is basically a spreadsheet. So each row in the spreadsheet is a unique airing of an ad on television. So you might have a political ad that airs thousands of times, and for each time it airs on, say, the Hartford Media Market, or in New York, or in Minneapolis, that's going to be a row in our spreadsheet for each of those airings. And along with that giant spreadsheet that we also get video files. So we end up sitting on thousands and thousands of video files of political ads. And we want to understand what's going on in those political ads. So in order to do that, we have some research questions that we develop, but we essentially build what we call a code book, which is sort of like a survey that you can fill out to indicate things about the ads. So where does that code book come from? There are variables in our code book that go back 20 years. We call those legacy variables. And if you think about it, back 20 years ago, we wanted to look at whether the economy was being mentioned in a political ad. We have to be careful each year that we don't change the wording of that question, because being able to compare across time is really important to us. So if we changed the wording of that question in 2020, we would no longer be able to compare our data going back 20 years. So it's very important that those variables be structured the same over time to enable that comparison. But at the same time, we certainly add things. So in 2020, we added to our codebook questions about coronavirus. Is coronavirus being mentioned? Is COVID-19 being mentioned in political ads? So when we add in those questions, that enables us to build up this codebook, and we now have essentially a survey, and the next thing that we need to do is test out the survey to see how well it's working. So in this testing procedure, we go through, and it's just really important for us that each of us is going to be doing the coding the same way. So if I'm going to fill out the survey about an ad, we want to make sure that I do it the same way that Millie does it, or the same way that Jake does it, that we're all doing it the same way. And so in order to get that consistency and that reliability, we do a lot of practice, and we kind of have to flesh it out with a lot of supplemental guidance. So take a variable that we have in our codebook. Sometimes we look at whether an American flag is featured in an ad. On its face, that seems really simple to do. Is there an American flag or not? But we actually encounter questions like, what about a cartoon of an American flag? Does that count? Or what about if part of the flag is featured but not the whole flag? Or what if someone's wearing a coat that has artwork on it that looks like an American flag? These are all questions that if we don't agree ahead of time on the answers to those questions, our coding isn't going to be reliable. We're not going to be able to say that we definitively know what's in the ads because the coders aren't doing it reliably. So we spend a lot of time trying to come up with what questions might arise, and then we sort of train our team to enable them to do it reliably. And the way that we test that is we take like maybe 20% of the ads that we want to, what we call human code. And we have 20% of those ads will be coded by 2 coders at least. So we're then able to, after the coding is all done, we can take the data and compare and see how well did we do for these ads that got double coded. Did the coders code them the same way? And for some variables, we get back our results. We get this statistic that tells us about reliability. And if that statistic is too low, we simply can't use that variable in our analysis. We kind of have to throw it out. So once we've gone through all of that coding and we've got our statistics back on how well we did, that's kind of when we get to do the fun work, which is the analysis. And that's when you really get to dig in on your research questions. So in our case, we want to see, are Republicans and Democrats, doing more attack ads or more promotion ads? How do those differ? We might want to know whether special interest groups are talking about different issues than candidates. Or we might want to be able to compare, are candidates on television putting out the same messages that they put out when they advertise on digital, on Facebook or Google? These are kind of the really interesting questions that we can only dig into once we have done all of that important coding work. So that's the work that we do for our human coding. But going forward, the Wesleyan Media Project is really interested in advertising, as I mentioned, on Facebook and Google. But on TV, there's a set number of ads. There aren't that many, and we can go through all of them with our human coders. But online, we couldn't possibly watch all those ads, right? There's just so many. So we're working with our Computational Delta Lab team, which is a student-driven lab that we have here on campus, and some of our postdocs to try to essentially use the human coding that we have done to train algorithms that can then assess that advertising at scale. So if we have this good human coding, we can feed that into machine learning models, and we're then able to assess millions of ads and get a sense of what issues are being talked about. Are they attack ads? Are they promotional ads? Those kinds of things.